right, thanks. Thanks for being here. Really appreciate seeing all of you as we move season to season together. Hopefully you have had an opportunity to at least do a brief run through of the document that was sent to you. The debrief document is kind of long, kind of wordy, but with 3 really good community conversations under our belt, there was a lot to parse through. So whether you read every single word, whether you skimmed it, whether you looked for a couple of things that you might have been looking for, whatever level you treated that document with, that's kind of going to be the focus of the first half of our meeting. Second half of our meeting tonight is going to be a focus on this community survey that we still have sort of hanging out in the balance and what we would like to do with that. So I will switch over to the document here in a second, but these are kind of the 3 topics that we're going to talk about tonight as it relates to putting a bow on what we learned during these listening sessions. Within the document, there is a SWOT analysis, which again is based on my findings from the notes that I took and the notes that other committee members in the room took and shared with me, thinking about what we learned and what emerging themes came out of those conversations. I definitely want to hear from you what stood out from your perspectives, whether you were in the sessions or not. What are your takeaways? And then thinking about what we have not learned, because of course not everyone in our community attended, not everyone in our community was represented. So we already know, Jennifer and I have talked about adding an additional listening session. Sorry, that didn't roll off the tongue. Additional listening session, because we did not capture a lot of parents of young children, parents of school-age children, and we know that that's a key user demographic here at this library. So we want to make sure that we hear from those individuals. So that's already on the docket. Jennifer's going to handle that. So we don't have to overly discuss it, other than just know that that was a group that did not turn out very heavily to those sessions for probably some very obvious reasons. We didn't have childcare available. We were on some busy weeknights that we held those sessions. So unfortunately, we just didn't have a big turnout from that group. So jumping over to our other document here, I do have the debrief document up. Of course, it's not going to be so friendly on the eyes to read it on the screen, but I'm happy to jump to any section that you'd like to get our conversation rolling here. So I'll leave it here on SWOT analysis in case you want to start with that topic. But what jumped out at you? What are the things that you took away from these sessions?
I think we have a lot of community support already, so it's not like we have to go out and try to sell the library and what the library is doing.
Right.
So, from their perspective, they like the library now. They either like the library because they're regular users of it. Although I think one of the weaknesses was that at least in the session that I was in, there were a number of folks that seemed unaware of things that were going on that they saw could be a benefit for them. So we saw communication as it's like, okay, so where might there be gaps in either who we're trying to reach or how we're trying to communicate to them.
Yeah. And I think I would follow that up too with saying people were surprised and delighted by what they learned that they didn't already know. So not only were they not aware, but it was things that often piqued their interest as they learned about it through these conversations.
As I listened to you talk about that, I did not get an opportunity to attend one of those sessions. But it makes me wonder if the communications that we're currently using for the library are as effective as they need to be to tell people what their opportunities are here. If people in those sessions were learning of programs or activities here that they didn't know about, I have to wonder about whether the communication that the library is doing is an outreach, because there's the quarterly city newsletter, and there's always something in there about the library. If maybe some of the programs just aren't, the communication about those aren't getting through.
You know, we asked a lot of them, like, where do you get a lot of your news from? Where do you prefer? And they labeled all the places we posted. So, I don't know if they're, I mean, one thing that we have less control over is a lot of them did say like Facebook, and we can't control the algorithm of Facebook. So unless we're paying for ads for things, you can't do too much about that.
Yeah, and here's an example. So this is just from one of the conversations. You know, how did you hear about today's session? And you're right. There was a wide variety of answers, and they are all of the channels that are currently being used. And so it raises that really important question of information still is missed by people. You're absolutely right. They're not necessarily getting everything that the library is pushing out, and yet they're getting it from the places where the library puts it, and every person had varying answers. I'm not very online, so I come to the building, or I'm very online and I always look at your Facebook page. And the good news for you is this is not a unique problem, but the hard answer is that libraries everywhere are facing this challenge, and there are not a lot of easy solutions because of the variety of differences in how people get their information. So I wish I had a magic answer for you in that, other than communications, having a communication plan, communication strategy, or enhancing that communication plan or strategy is probably an important thing to add to your strategic plan. Whether it's the most important or not, it's probably something that makes sense, particularly when there's not a local newspaper or a truly local source of news.
And well, can I just add one thing to that?
Yeah.
Currently in the strategic plan that we're working on right now, one of the goals is to post more on Facebook, and the more you post, the more Facebook pushes out your page. So that's already in the works of trying to increase that. And the other thing that I guess we should maybe add to those messages is, you know, please like and share our content, because if people interact with your content, then it'll pop up on their feeds.
Yeah.
So that's one thing that we could add, that it's more likely to pop up. But we can't control whether people read what's available to them.
But that also speaks to that concept that came up in a couple of the conversations, that friend raising, that advocacy piece, that when your key users know that liking and sharing, reposting, adding that you're not only interested in an event, but going to the event and then actually going to the event that you said you were going to, all of those steps, when you coach your patrons through it and teach them how to be your best supporter, is that two-way street. So then maybe you don't have to pay for as many ads. You still might post as much, but now because you've got that engagement going and your users know that that helps you, again, that can be part of both advocacy and a communication strategy. But with Mike's point about the community support that you have, those individuals may just need the information to do so, and then they will be eager to help the library in that way, because it costs them nothing other than 30 seconds of their time to like it and click it and share it.
Kind of on the opportunity or threat side, we are, for the most part, wholly dependent on the budget dollars that we get from the city of Franklin. And one thing that I see as a positive, and both the mayor and the financial administrator came to our meeting yesterday, and that was the second time that we saw them, and that's new stuff.
Yeah.
And they basically came to talk about where we were going forward with the agreement that the city has with Johnson Controls for a lot of the changes that are going to be done with this. So that was another thing that was an educational piece for people, was that, well, where do you get your money to run the library?
Mm-hmm.
Right, so
Yeah.
so letting people know that your tax dollars are going towards supporting the library. So if there are some things that you feel very strongly about, then make sure you get in touch with your elected officials and say, we need you to consider fully supporting the library's needs from a financial standpoint.
Yeah, I think there's real opportunity in that section. It's not surprising that people coming to your listening session are already supporters of the library. That kind of goes hand in hand. But by the same token, many people were verbally in agreement of wanting to take action in support of the library, wanting to speak in support of the library. So that would be something really important to take advantage of, again, with a strong strategy about how to mobilize your community with positive support for you. And I'll try not to scroll too fast so we don't go on a three-dimensional roller coaster ride. And I should be clear that in the threats category, we want to think of these as both real and imagined, because I would say this threat here, this first one, community members who may not value the investment in the library, that certainly wasn't represented by individuals in the room, but was talked about as a potential threat. What if the community sees the library as a place that's diminishing in community value? Would that be bad for the library? And that's kind of what we're alluding to in some of those conversations where people talked about what could happen to the library's finances because you are reliant on that local allocation. So I don't want you to think that these threats came up in that people in this room stated them as pointed threats, but rather sort of those possible threats to think about how to have sort of a proactive action about, not necessarily defensive action about.
Those would be the people that probably don't come to the library, right?
Right.
So
Or
they
the
wouldn't
person,
be the one that would necessarily
Yeah.
know about our listening sessions to come to.
or the
say
person that demands to see I want to talk to a manager because I'm sick and tired of my property taxes, or wants to make a public statement at a budget hearing, who maybe hasn't engaged with the library and sees it as some sort of waste of community resources but hasn't engaged with you.
Thinking about that a little bit, if people understood how much of their property tax
This
is
was our question.
You hit it.
Yeah.
You hit it.
If
Yeah.
people understood how much of their property tax was supporting
Yeah.
the library, they might say, that's all? That's all that they allocate?
Yeah.
Or they might say, well, that's way too much. But I don't think people, once they understand that the library's primary resource is property tax, then they need to then understand, well, how much of their property tax is supporting the library and how much is going to other places. And it's that age-old problem of a finite resource being demanded on by lots of different constituencies and people who are looking for services.
Yeah.
But maybe someplace in your the library's communication, it can say, did you know that X cents of your property tax dollar goes to the library?
Yeah.
Didn't we used to do something like that with like an annual report?
Yeah.
And that was really cool because I loved looking through that. And I don't even live in Franklin, but I'm like, this is so cool. Like we are offering all of these. This is how much I would be paying for like all of these items, but I'm getting them for free.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really handy when we had that.
I think in the community conversation that I attended, someone brought up having something in the tax bill showing where all of the taxes get allocated, and that isn't something that happens in Franklin?
I thought it did. Or maybe
So
I'm just
what
thinking
was
of
shared
something
with
You
us
get a
during
separate separate page.
But it
Yeah.
doesn't say where the money's
It's
spent.
not like a pie
Right.
chart.
No, there's no pie chart.
There's
that
a
I
pie
can
chart
recall.
in-
I used to put those together.
Yeah, so
don't
I want to
recall.
share that
Okay.
someone in the meeting did share a pie chart.
Okay.
And the pie chart said, this much is community safety, this much is utilities, this much is this. And of course, the library allocation is like just a
Line.
2.7%
It's a tiny
slice of
sliver.
the pie. And so what transpired in that conversation was, what if that slice of the pie for the library was then further broken out to say this 2.7%, and I'm making up that number, but this 2.7% of the big city budget then breaks out into, this is what goes to collections, this is what goes to personnel, this is what goes to staff. And so we're jumping ahead a little bit to our survey, but this is kind of what we might want to poll our community about, are these ideas of, within our survey, providing information, and of course this is a skeleton sentence, we would flesh this out a little bit more, but the skeleton sentence here of explaining that this is how the library budget comes to be, we receive this funding yearly. How would you want to understand this and start to understand what your community, how it would be helpful? Do they want to see it with their tax bill? So do they want to see it from the municipality? Do they want to see it in that little library receipt that says, today by checking out 20 DVDs, you saved $300? Do they want to see it in some little mailer piece that's a little postcard or an infographic so that they don't have to worry about, to the penny, to the, 6 figures here and 5 figures here? Do they want to see it as a separate financial report? Do they want to see this as some sort of like state of the library program and present the budget once it's presented? Or any combination of these? And of course, there's plenty of other ideas. These are just mine. But this might be a valuable question for your community in a survey. People are really engaged. People did want to learn about how the library is funded and what the library does with it. We learned a lot in these sessions, and there's a lot we already know, but this is something you might want to poll your community about, is what would be the best way that they would want to learn and be transparent, or have the library be transparent about those finances. And then there's a second version of this question, because we also talked about lack of awareness about the foundation and lack of knowledge of what the foundation does. So a second version, or I shouldn't say a second version, but sort of a follow-up to this question, is around what the foundation does to help support the library, and what would be ways that people would want to learn or engage with the foundation. Do they want to receive a letter or an appeal? Do they want to know more about membership? Do they want to be volunteers? Do they want to get email messages asking them for money? Do they want to be a part of fundraising events? And again, we can flesh out better options in those sort of drop-down menus or checkbox menus. But I think these were definite gaps in community understanding about the library, and an opportunity for you to promote how well you are utilizing these public dollars.
Do you find in your work with other libraries that type of information is readily available for other aspects of city dollars, but just the library's left out? And what I'm thinking of is, okay, let's say that the library would do this. But do people also want to know how their tax dollars are spent for safety and for control, fire control, and the health department and other things? It's just like, what, we would just like to have broader transparency for what our tax dollars are going for, and what does that relate to? So we could kind of be a little bit of pioneering in doing a better job of communicating how their tax dollars
Yeah.
Oh, I
go.
can see city being mad at us.
Well, and there's a couple of different versions of answers to that. So no, this is not something that a lot of libraries regularly engage with. And often the answer is one that you'll find pretty obvious. There's not a person on staff who does this type of data analysis. So many times this type of data is coming from someone at their municipality who is a money person and a data person and a numbers person.
Were you both of those, Paul?
May have been.
But then on the flip side, some libraries might engage with this when they might be undergoing a capital campaign or they might be working towards a referendum. So they might tap an expert in their municipality. They might hire someone who does this as a consultant or a contract worker, because they may be making an angle for, we need this money because here are the gaps, or we have been so successful and here's how we're going to show you how we did it. Please help us with the next phase of what it is we're working on with our building or our programs. But it's not something that libraries are regularly engaging with, again, mostly because all the folks on a library staff are focused on the library operations.
You know, as we're having this conversation, a thought comes to my mind. We were talking about what people may want to know, and it might be just sort of an interesting kind of thing, and then after that they forget about it, but how much of their tax dollar goes to support the library. But another interesting question might be, could the library double its usage and not really require any additional tax dollar support? How much more service could the library provide to the community before it really needs additional support?
Years ago?
Well, I
I
think
don't know how we would.
that's-
I
Do you
don't
get
know
my,
how
do you
we
understand
would-
my
I understand your
question?
question. I think there's a lot of gray area in the question, because you could spend money on more books, but the books may not get used if there's not enough circulation staff to keep them flowing on the shelves or processed in the back room. You could say we've expanded our program budget, we've doubled our program budget, let's just say, but we don't have people to man and staff those programs. So there's always a human element on that personnel side for almost any expansion that a library offers. So buying more materials will have a labor cost to it. Having more programs has a labor cost to it. But it's hard to quantify that with some of the data that you have. I mean, I can't imagine that you all have done a cost benefit analysis on your cost of supplies, hours of your staff, how many hours it takes to produce a program per person who attends a program. You probably have not crunched those
We haven't
numbers.
done a formal one, but
Yeah.
I think we talk about that.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
But
we've talked
I
about
guess where I
programs.
was thinking,
Yeah.
if I think of a library as a repository of materials that can be circulated, what has been the circulation of materials over time? And if that increased 30%, which would be a huge increase, would it really require more resources, or could the staff handle an increase in circulation? Because I hear you saying you do need to put them back on the shelf. And, you know, so there's work involved. If you have more circulation, you have more goods coming in and out, well, somebody's got to put it back on the
Yeah.
shelf. And, you know, I just don't know the answer to that question.
And I think that my question to your question would be, what would drive that 30% growth?
Well, we're talking about the community's perception of the library and becoming more
Yeah.
aware of what service is available here. Well, if you gain that additional awareness by the community, that would suggest that community is going to interact with the library more, which would then drive greater circulation.
Yeah. And so again, reflexively, what would drive the greater awareness? A marketing push, a outreach push, a advertising push, tours. Right. And any of those answers, again, I would argue are labor. And it could be labor that's cooked into the work of people who are already here. So I'm certainly not suggesting that any change requires a new person or a new staff member. But there is that element of almost nothing that the library gains doesn't happen without a human effort. Whether that's, your foundation, your volunteers, your friends. Almost none of those come at any cost.
I hear part of what you're saying.
Yeah.
What
And-
drives the additional awareness
Right.
is somebody making some outreach
Yeah.
effort, and that outreach effort doesn't come
Yeah.
without resource requirements.
And as a person who works in this field in consulting and talks to libraries of all kinds and all sizes, every library has untapped audiences. We know that there are people in our community that would benefit. And we know that more people could sign up for cards. We know that more people could come to programs. We know that more items could go off of our shelves. But nobody has found the secret other than putting a lot of staff time, effort, and resources. And it could happen within that same budget. So part of that is the strategic plan, right? What are we going to do to maximize the biggest, widest audience highest, best use of our collection, relevant, attractive, and full programs at all costs or at all times, all of those come from some sort of effort within your community to get people to come here.
I always think it's interesting that every month there's new people that get library cards. I mean, of course, you have people coming in,
Yeah.
moving in, and all the things, but like.
But it's hundreds
Yes, yes.
every month.
Every
Right,
month.
right.
Every month. So
Yeah.
I'm
Well,
always
if
like,
there
wow,
are
how did that happen?
36,000 people in the city, that's from age 0 to 99, how many Franklin residents have cards? Do you have 30,000 cards outstanding? Do you have 10,000 cards outstanding? How many?
So we measure active cards, not
Okay.
all cards, because we want to know who's using them. It doesn't matter if they have a card if they're not using it.
Right.
So active cards is around 13,000. Active Franklin cards, Franklin residents.
Hundreds of new ones every month.
And
And that's not like a new marketing initiative to get like this new pocket of people. That's just
Yeah.
every month, standard, like average, on average.
And if we're like thinking about library utopia, right? Like in
Right.
a world where everyone knows about the library, everyone values the library,
It'd be
every single library is underutilized by these criteria
Right.
because you don't have every single patron,
What would
user,
it be?
citizen in your
Double,
community with a
triple?
card, right?
quadruple that. Like,
Right.
wow.
Right. And so it also begs the question of, you have many users who are very happy. How much effort, tipping those scales, how much effort is and should go into untapped audiences, because your resources are not infinite, right? Your staff is not infinite, your time is not infinite, your marketing budget is not infinite, your outreach time and effort are not infinite. So how do you balance what is good, strong, year over year growth, steady, holding steady as well as growth when you know those untapped opportunities, without tipping that scale of we've doubled our building, we've doubled our staff, we've doubled the budget, or any combination of those things. So it is a fine balance in, we all identified in over many meetings, I shouldn't say individuals, groups of people that may be missing out on the library. It's, up to this group to decide how much and how much of that effort and strategy should be put towards not just growth, but reaching those untapped markets and what is most important and beneficial to the community. There's not a right answer, there's not a wrong answer, just whatever is going to drive your community forward in the best way possible that still meets your mission.
It was interesting, a couple of years ago, Sam and I did a little project where we downloaded all the addresses of all the card holders in Franklin and then overlaid it on a Google map just to see what did that look like. And it was amazing. I mean, it's pretty evenly spread. It's not like there's a big hole anywhere. They're evenly spread all across Franklin in every neighborhood. And I'm like, man, if we could just get signs in those yards. I have a library card. Do you?
What a great thought that is.
Yeah, I think that's
Be a member, get a member.
Little cards to put in everyone. That'd be cool.
What's that?
I think that's a great idea, yard signs.
And in some communities, this has been borne out through kind of that friend-raising opportunity, right, that we're talking about, whether that's signs or window clings. It's often in conjunction with sort of friends or foundation efforts. In other communities, it's what has played out in the school district issuing sort of automatic cards or digital cards to all school children, so that in hopes that you reach not just the children themselves, but the
Right.
families. So that has been a big push in recent years.
I went to the Indian Community School. I did a lot of cards there.
Yeah.
So
In other communities, there's sort of talk of having DMV and voter registration sort of coordination of effort, so that if you have you've gone to the DMV, you've updated your driver's license, that those records are sent over to libraries. I don't believe that's happened in Wisconsin, but I have seen this sort of out in the world. There's obviously some pitfalls to that with who that includes and excludes, privacy information, of course. But right, getting as many people registered for cards as possible is one step. But then there's also that awareness piece. You know, having been through one of the libraries that piloted a project to have all school children receive a library card, we get that unawareness, right? Not everybody understands what the value of it is, or how to use it, or how to take advantage of that. So there's still that information piece that goes along with it. These are all great questions. I wish I had the perfect answer for you. But if we solve it, we will really be able to pilot something incredible.
You know, since this is the second strategic plan we're doing, and we're already measuring success against, you know, different categories that
Yeah.
we have, I think one of the strategies that we need to continue going forward with is to continue to look for those places where we are not serving, right? So while we may not have the answer to it, that's got to be. This goes back when Rachel was still the director here, and we went to a program where one of the things on the program talked about reimagining the public library. And so things like outreach, stuff that gets done where you're on a demand shelf for things, or just like, or just other stuff that exists. We went to visit the main library in Madison. They have artists in residence.
Mm-hmm.
Now, granted, that's a large, but it gets you thinking about, you know, what types of things could we be doing that's different? Do we have the health department?
We do.
You know,
The farmer's market.
be here, so that's just like now you do educational pieces from different parts of the city, public safety, you know, whatever it is, where we talk about lifelong education of people. Well, it's like, okay, on the everyday stuff, or the things that people can really find beneficial, can the library extend itself and bring in resources where now, okay, we're going to be having these types of things here, and do more of that, so that people then come to us and say, can you do a program on this? Or what if we were to do something like whatever? You know, we're now you're having more of a dialogue with the community on the types of things that you can do once
Yeah.
they've seen some of the stuff that you offer. That's a little bit different
Yeah.
than traditional, I'll call them library
Yeah.
programs.
I'd
The
be
work-
interested in hearing your comment as you work with other libraries.
Yeah.
Have like a van.
Is it
Kids can go in the van.
harder to activate somebody who's not using the library? Or is it harder to get somebody who is using the library to use it more?
Good question. It's a
'Cause
really
one of the
good
thoughts that
question.
one of the thoughts
Yeah.
I've got is, I come to the library to check out books because I like just pleasure reading.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm looking for information, but more so often it's pleasure reading. But I never look at any of the displays about other things that are available at the library. But when I check out a book, I am at the desk and I'm telling you, I'm giving my card and I scan the book so they know I've got the book. What if, when I check out a book, you get a little flyer that goes as a bookmark about a program that's about to happen at the library, or a resource that's different than the one I'm using? Because what you would then end up doing is taking somebody who's only using this part of the library and broadening their understanding
Yeah.
of the library. And if they get excited about that, they will tell their friends.
Yeah. Okay, so this is a good question. I think one thing that we know, some of it's data and some of it is anecdotal. You know, if you capture a library user, you have a library user for life, right? So you have somebody who is, other than, you know, we've completely gotten rid of our mystery section and you're a mystery reader and you're like, how could they? They've ruined my library, I'm going somewhere else. Or bad interpersonal interactions where you have a bad hospitality interaction and someone says, you know, I'm never coming to this library again, as we as library workers have all heard in our lives. There are times in which you lose a user. But by the same token, it's really difficult to gain a non-user because it requires, again, some type of laborious effort, whether it's marketing, one-to-one outreach, because if they are not a user, you have to find them where they are. They are not going to drive by and be like, library, let me go check it out. If they don't understand the library or they've never had a positive interaction in a library, their likelihood of jumping that barrier is going to be difficult. Now, on the flip side, you can really motivate non-users if you're delivering something that they desire deeply. So that's where these marketplace strategies come in. So when I say marketplace strategies, having streaming content for people who don't think that libraries have anything from this century, right? If they think of it as a place where books go to die, and then you tell them that we have streaming music, we have downloadable movies, we have ebooks, you might win that person over immediately because they go, oh my gosh, I didn't know that we had this thing. But again, there's labor involved in getting that person there, regardless of what that labor is. So if we think about something like a community that's experiencing a severe crisis of unhoused people, or we know that a refugee community is moving into our area, libraries might decide very intentionally to mobilize resources or services to serve that really specific need in that time. Those people are likely non-users, but you're making a really conscious decision to mobilize your resources to that direction. Again, I can't say that one is better or worse, that one is easier or more difficult. So much depends on the needs of your community, the available resources that you have, the mission, what's going on in the rest of your community is also a factor here as well. If you have a school system that's in deep decline, the library might actually be the place in which literacy is happening, reading is happening, because the school system can no longer provide that enrichment. So I don't have an easy answer, but you already have won over the people that come to your library. Your job is to continue to keep them happy, have relevant materials, delight them. Hopefully, if people are engaging with staff, they will have those magical experiences of, oh, you're checking out this DIY book. Did you know that we have a collection of tools that you can check out? But that really requires some sort of intervention because technology has just not gotten to the point where we can make those type of recommendations other than maybe in the catalog.
That was going to be what I was going to
I know.
Because AI shows up all over the place.
Yeah.
So would it require, here we are, we're part of the Milwaukee County Federated Library System.
But it's close with the new stuff.
So what I'm thinking is there something that could possibly be done system-wide so that it benefits all the libraries, whereby to be able to do the type of thing where you say, okay, we'll let AI do it. AI is going to be able to get whatever we say. It's going to be able to get information on who's not a user. It's going to be getting information on the types of things that you like. Oh, did you know that there's a new book out? Whatever like that. So to get those people who are not users or low users or have cards but are not active and things like that, being able to do it on a large scale and then trickle it down to the community libraries probably is the way that it would need to go, simply because of the cost.
And you're hitting on the most important thing is library vendors, library technology is all pretty cost prohibitive. And most of the time it's not coming to libraries until it's become less expensive in the marketplace. So is it possible? Absolutely. Is it something that MCFLS or individual libraries could afford? Unlikely, I think, in the current state.
I was having a conversation with Jennifer before you all got here, and we were talking about the library budget, because it must be time you're going to get that together. And she was
You
just...
can't get rid of that, can you? The calendar comes along, it's just like,
I would say
it's supposed to be budget
the
time.
rhythms are embedded when you
it's just a wheel, and it's just
Of
got that
course.
little bump in it.
Of course.
But the comment that was made is, I'm looking for ways to reduce costs, because the pressures on all local governments
right.
in Wisconsin now is you just can't raise new resources, and therefore you can't give additional resources to the services that you're already providing. And I don't know how, I mean, I've said it to Jennifer before when I was working here at the city, saying the amount of additional tax revenue you're getting isn't even enough to pay the raises for your the existing staff, let alone do
Yeah.
other things. And then you might have a utility cost increase or
Or an AC failure.
an AC failure, or whatever it happens to be. Right now, you could have an AC failure because it's kind of cold in here, but and that's
We just
an aside.
That's why that's why it is cold in here again, because we just did have a failure.
Well, yeah.
The point being is that there are only so many finite resources, and now we're talking about, here's something we could really use to enhance.
Kick it up.
And, well, there's just no resource available
Yeah.
to do that.
Yeah.
Let me ask you a question since you have the background. You're thinking out loud here. I don't know that there's a really strong dialogue between city government and the community. From the standpoint of how much value do you place on the services that you get, that your taxes pay for, to the point where, understanding whatever, would you be willing to pay more in taxes if you were able to then get better service from?
And the problem with that, Mike, is I would say that elected officials would challenge your comment, because when people aren't happy about something they think government is supposed to do, they let elected officials know.
Yeah.
There's no question. Just listen to some public comment in front of a common council meeting sometime, and you'll find out that they're not happy. They will let them know. But if your comment about would you be willing to pay more in tax, in Wisconsin you can't.
Right.
You just literally cannot raise taxes. And almost every local government in the state raises taxes that they can to the maximum they're allowed already. So it's not like you can raise it more unless you want to have a referendum. And most elected officials will say the only thing I'd be willing to put a referendum on the books for is additional public safety, be it police or fire. Because that's the only thing that the public really is willing to support with a higher tax dollar. And this is the conundrum here of how do you provide, in this case, library services with only so much money?
But what they don't realize is how little money it would take for the library. It really wouldn't take that much more per person. You're not talking about raising taxes by $100. Just a little bit would give us a lot more. I mean, we're hurting. We're hurting. It's just.
We will be soon, though. Like, if it continues the way that it is, it's not gonna.
Is there a lot of, I'm going to keep going back to you because you got the experience. Is there a lot of discussion that goes on how the pie gets sliced?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a lot of discussion about that. And the issue, when you have those conversations, they say, if you want to put more of this pie for this piece, for this thing, then it's got to come out of somebody else's hide.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because the pie is not any real bigger. So if you're going to put more resource to X, then it's got to come out of Y.
Right.
And it's not to say that we're talking about in perpetuity, right? It's just like, okay, it's the fire department's turn to get a bigger chunk of the tax dollars because of whatever they need to
Right,
do.
they have new equipment needs, or
okay,
they have to
next
expand to a
year,
new station.
And so from a planning standpoint, it would be really nice for a department, for a part of the city to know and to help plan for 3 years from now, we're going to need X amount of dollars so that that stuff goes on. So that we're doing more than just a yearly thing.
And-
Those kinds of conversations do take place in City Hall, because I was part of them, but they're almost always and exclusively wrapped around a new toy that's needed. You mentioned a fire truck.
Sure.
That would be, and I hate to call it a toy because somebody's
Well,
that's
yeah,
not a
it
toy.
costs $1 million
Well,
bucks.
and other examples I've seen in communities are things like there is a social worker in the health department who then is embedded in the library for a 2-year contract, and that position is embedded at the library to assist with this influx of a refugee population. Or there is a partnership between the school district in which a librarian is half-time at the library and half-time at the school. These are things that are models in much smaller communities than yours, but it's a way in which the pie itself doesn't change,
Right.
but the divisions within it do, or expenses are shared across multiple units within a municipality because of how this person's job is executed, rather than the tax rate changing or a referendum needing to go through. And again, I'm not saying that that's the right and best way to do it, but it is ways that it could be handled. I think at the heart of all of this is understanding, what does the library need to ask for, and what would you be needing as a strategy around that? Is it community support? Is it municipal relationships? Is it someone with an eye on the money, looking at the return on investment? Any one of those or all of those strategies could be part of what we're talking about, but it seems like at the heart of this is that resources are being used fully, and more resources may be needed to do more and different, more and better, more and higher quality, whatever we want to describe that as. So to sort of circle us back to what we still might need to know from our community, and we kind of touched on this a little bit, is that this could be a potential survey question for your community. This is not a fully fleshed out idea, but it is a way to tackle it that, I think, as we said, you have a community that's very happy with your library. I don't think they want anything to change. They didn't say that anything that you were doing was irrelevant, not worth it, etc. So thinking about maintenance of effort, if the community was looking for something to be added, is it outreach and community engagement, which might require shifting a person's responsibilities, having a staff member focus on a new thing, hiring a new staff member. Something that got me thinking about what you were saying about this idea of going out and helping people understand how to use the library, that concept of a library educator. So not just going to outreach and being like, hi, I'm with the library, here's some stickers, here's some books, but someone who's actually teaching people how to use the library, use library resources could be beneficial in that category. Mm-hmm. Would your community want to see the growth of the Friends of the Library, people who volunteer, who do small fundraisers, who do projects to help benefit the library? And then again, coming back to this idea of library foundation. Library foundations are often working in concert with the library to do those big dollar benefits to the library collections, programs, enhancements. Foundations are often, or I shouldn't say often, but can be a pass-through for grants, or municipalities can be pass-through for grants. Foundations can help with that, and foundations can also help with some of those advocacy pieces, being other members of your community to go to Library Legislative Day and talk to state electeds. They may be the people that you engage if you need to do an advocacy effort within your community or with your municipal electeds. So these are just 3 examples of something that we could ask your community about. But it sounds a lot like what we may want to ask our community are a survey of maybe a few questions that are big questions, but that also have some embedded education for the community within them.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too, because when you say things like, besides maintaining current programs and things like that, the first thing might be, well, what are the current programs? What are the current services? So having the ability to then, before you answer this question.
Right, here's a link to the list of what we provided, or here's a link to our annual report so you can see all the things we did last year. This may have an educational component. Now the downside is this is not a survey where people are just going to be like, yeah, smiley face, I'm really happy with everything the library offers. This is a little bit more of a intellectual pursuit to do a survey like this for the people who take it. That's not a reason to not do it this way.
Right.
But it may help us get to some of the deeper questions that we all have about, right, really at the heart of what does your community want? And it may be that your community wants to just keep going, you're doing great, And we can take some things that we've learned from our community conversations and still be able to write a very good strategic plan with that.
Because we're
But if we
asking-
have some of these deeper answers, we might get some real juicy stuff to work with.
Yeah, so because we're asking questions that are going to give us some direction for the next 5 years, how much information in providing to the community of what we've done in the last 5 years would help them kind of get a perspective of the types of things that, along from an educational standpoint, here's the types of things that have been done.
Yeah.
Did you know that, these
Yeah.
hit the big ones like.
It could be
outreach
helpful to have a
programs.
little preamble that sets that stage. I would warn against being too wordy, because if it takes too long to do a survey, most people will quit. People see survey and they think they're gonna, how many stars, or rank it on a series of 1 to 5.
3 minutes.
Right. People won't spend a huge amount of time. So you'll want to have, if it's deeper and educational, 3 to 5 questions max, with a link out if they choose to engage with it. It does make it harder to offer paper surveys when you have that sort of format. Again, not a reason to not do it, but it may look different than other surveys than they've taken in their community, because it will have a little effort behind it.
Well, if we had a paper, for example,
Yeah.
let's say you had a one-pager to go along with the paper survey
Yeah.
that was kind of like an executive summary
Yeah.
of the last strategic plan.
Yeah.
How are you going to distribute the survey?
In the work that I do, I'm happy to use any platform that the library may already have access to. For most libraries, I'm using Google Forms, or I'm using SurveyMonkey, JotForm. I am not a data scientist, so I make no bones. I don't have a platform that I use. I use whatever the library wants to use.
Well, of the ones you enumerated,
Yeah.
which I realize is not the entire universe.
Correct,
but
yes,
of the ones you
yes.
enumerated, I'm thinking that's distributed to email addresses.
Correct. It's an online survey.
It also can be linked to from our website.
Well, I was wondering, have you
Our-
considered handing the survey out with everyone who checks out a book? So
Yeah,
that
it can happen
all
that
your
way.
current patrons, in essence, over some period of time, would then get the survey.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot of printing for probably little return.
Probably what we would do is have a QR code linking to the survey online, and then a paper form for those who don't
Who want
feel
it.
comfortable with the online portion of it.
Who ask for it, because
Yeah.
then they'll probably do it if they're asking.
I bet if you had when I check out a book, you give them a little card and it's got the QR code that they can then take the survey with that QR code. You get a fair number of people responding.
That's a pretty typical strategy. Some people will print it they'll do like the cheap Vista print and put them on business card size. Some people will do them as bookmark size flyers. Some people do them as 1/4 flyers. Most communities have some sort of paper distribution, even if the survey itself is online. Almost every library that I've worked with has done what you're talking about, which is ask at the desk for a paper survey, and then they're produced on demand rather than
Exactly.
You know,
pre-printed.
We
Yeah.
talked about people wanting to know how much tax support is for your library. If you had that bookmark and you hand it out, one side of it could be, did you know facts about your library? With the other side, the QR code to take the survey. And it would be a way to communicate some of these things we're talking about.
Yeah.
And so I think since we've jumped into a lot of what we've talked about is what we want to survey our community, we've got about 30 plus minutes left in our time tonight. I think at the heart of what I saw in the community conversations is that the survey probably has to be about that future vision, not about current satisfaction, not about current ideas, but that looking forward. So for your consideration, I've got a handful of questions here. I am not recommending that we use all of them, but I wanted to give you a little bit of a variety. That we do very little free text in these because one, again, I'm not a data scientist, I'm a librarian. So I can do research, but I am not a researcher. So that's one of my caveats that I always tell clients. But by the same token, we want to have some free text as options because patrons will have ideas that we want to hear from them. So almost all of these questions represent something that can be checkboxes, choose these options, drop-down menus, ranked choices, because that is much easier data to parse for our purposes. So in these sort of vision questions looking forward, we want to know what they value, and I would suggest this is probably the least valuable question on here based on what we already have found out through the MCFLIS survey and based on what we heard in our community conversations. But this is a very straightforward question in which we would do either checkbox, check all that apply, or a ranked list, and this would be of your choosing. You know, what do we want to queue up for them that we want to learn about? Second idea here is finding out whether or not there are access barriers to the library. And so this would be check all that apply. The library's not big enough for me. There's not enough meeting rooms. I don't like the hours. What you're offering isn't relevant. I cannot access the facility. You're not offering things in my language, et cetera, et cetera. And then offer other as so that they could.
I agree with you. I like that question. I wasn't keen on the first one. Just because you said that we pretty much know the answer.
We
to that
kind of know
question.
the answers, yeah. I'm going to put a star by that one. Okay. So then more of an open-ended question, how does the library benefit the community? We heard a lot about this from our conversations. This certainly could be something that you could casually poll your community. You know, that could be a Facebook question that you want to get some interaction and engagement. But it does offer the opportunity for people to suggest improvements. This question, how do you think the library will help you in your personal or professional life in the future? It was very interesting in the listening sessions to hear what people, I forget exactly how I framed the question, but it was something to the effect of, you know, in the next 5 years, what do you see as the main purpose of the library? And we heard a lot of things around the social engagement, the community connections made here, the opportunity to come to the library for more than just books. So whether it was for programs, events, interactions that they were having with staff or peers or people in the community, that was a big at the heart of this. There were also a lot of people who answered this question in the listening sessions around the things that are library bread and butter. I hope I can still come here and get all the books I want. I hope that I can still come here and utilize the meeting rooms. I hope that I will be coming here to see really amazing programs that are relevant to me. So we had that balance between, you know, that library as third space, that library as a community place, as well as the traditional library still is a traditional library in that future. So this could give us more, a broader audience to ask this question to than the audience that was at our community conversations.
It
Because
also speaks to the future, and
Yeah.
which is what your 5-year plan is.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then I had already touched on this question, but this idea of beyond maintenance of effort, what do you think is a strategy for the library to focus on? Outreach and community events came up a lot in our community conversations. It doesn't mean that the library has to go in that direction, but it sure was a big topic. You have a busy community, an active community, a community that's geographically spread with no city center, with lots and lots of things happening for all ages. Outreach and community engagement might be something really important to pull your community about. And then, again, Friends and Library Foundation as areas of focus. This could be, again, rank these in order of importance to you. Check all that you want to see the library work on. And of course, these 3 points are not the only ones. You know, we could talk about that concept of health education, a social worker. We want to see staff that are bilingual, trilingual. We could add anything to this category, but you kind of get the gist of what this is suggesting. And then we had these 2 questions that we talked about last month, because we were definitely focused on money last month. These ideas of not only providing education, but also wanting to understand how your community would like to learn about the library's funding. And so once again, this offers us the opportunity to educate them and ask them about the library's municipal allocation, as well as asking them about what they think about how the foundation might conduct its business to raise money. So we don't necessarily have to double down on the foundation. I'm certainly not suggesting that 2 questions on a very short survey about the foundation should happen, but you will probably, because of the level of unawareness about the foundation, because of the opportunities with an aging population who may have money they'd like to give away, and the growth of your community as far as the opportunities for new movers, the financial attainment of many in your community. Fundraising is a really good question, I think, to be asking your community about in
Yeah,
one
I think
capacity
just
or another.
Reading it is gonna just open up their minds to like think about it.
Yeah.
So
And then just like Wikipedia, you could be like, and please give us $2 just for reading this survey.
here's a link to donate now.
Here's your link to donate now. So these are just my thoughts. These are not the only questions we can ask, but I think we feel maybe like this might be a valuable question to ask. What else do you see on here, or do you have versions of something else you want to see?
I personally like question 4 there, again, because it speaks to the future.
Mm-hmm.
Now, one of the things that's going through my mind, and I understand what you're saying, but I keyed in on your thought that the survey should be a finite number of questions. And therefore, I say we have to carefully select which questions we want.
Yeah.
Because we only have so many questions that we can put there.
And only so much time that people will give to it, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So,
I question a little bit having too much open-ended, not be having like the multiple choice, and what will we do with this information?
So this particular question, I've done versions of this in Jot form, and I've done versions of this in Google Forms. What I would propose is to, number one, you can limit your characters, right? So they'll run out of space, and their answer will either be gibberish or it will, cut off immediately on that end word. But to give them a prompt of what are the 3 words that would describe what you want to get out of. So you're giving them, even if you don't limit them just to 3 words, you're giving them some parameters around that question, or asking them to,
Right.
you wouldn't have them write a haiku, but
Right.
what are 2 sentences that would explain the future of the library? If you could write the library's mission statement, what would it say? So that you're giving them some brackets around how long you want that statement to be.
And when they all come back with a coffee shop, or
Everybody wants a gosh dang coffee shop in their library.
and the
Everybody.
community hub, what do we
Right.
do with that information?
Delete it. No, I'm just kidding. But here's the thing. Because I am not producing this as a data scientist, I'm reading right past that and looking at the other answers, because let's be real, a coffee shop is probably the pie in the sky, is
Right.
more of a pie in the sky idea than expanding your staff. A coffee shop might be a more difficult thing to arrange than having a budget specifically for outreach. So
That is-
because I'm not
nice.
creating something to really crunch the numbers, I'm looking for the big picture ideas. We are looking for the big picture ideas. We would sort that category and go, okay, there's 47 answers about the coffee shop, but this one wants, embedded scientists at the library. Okay, there's a kernel of an idea. Let's discuss that, because we know that the library wants to engage through programs, not through being baristas. Does that help?
Yeah, I'm just trying to see the whole picture.
Yeah.
Of okay, now what are we gonna do with this information?
Yeah.
I think that's a great question.
Yeah.
For whatever questions we have there, how are you going to respond to it? But on the item number 5, and I'm thinking aloud, so you guys will
Oh, yeah.
probably shoot me back on this, but when I said besides maintaining current programs, all I think then is I'm planting a seed. I'd rather ask the question, what services should the library be offering that it's not currently offering? And that would speak to your 5-year plan about if we're going to expand our service, what is the one the community wants the most?
And there's several ways that we could phrase that. And so think of this, think of this as a draft.
I
Yeah.
never thought of the library as a source of a streaming service. And yet,
Yeah.
I'm hearing you say that some libraries can do that, be
Yeah.
it music or video. I
Yeah.
would never have thought of the library as a potential streaming source. And I don't even know if you do offer that now, but if.
Yes, for
Yeah.
years. We've
Well,
offered it for years.
But I'd have no idea how to access it, or, because I stream music all the time. Are you saying I could be streaming some stuff from the library that,
Yes.
Yeah, for
Hoopla.
free.
but, and I'm a patron here, so I don't know how I don't know that. But, and I don't want to get so focused on that, but
Yeah.
I'm saying, in terms of the questions you want to ask people, you might say, what do they, and because if they said a service you're already offering, and that was the one that everybody, that became, if you had 40% of your people say, I want you to offer a service you're already offering, well, that tells me people don't know you have it.
I have a stupid question.
There are no stupid questions.
Challenge accepted. With the tone and how these are presented, in your past history, do you get a lot where those open-ended questions, do you get some sort of feedback saying, and I don't want this to affect my taxes, because it does kind of have a twinge of,
Yeah.
hey man, just want to take your temperature, and especially because all 3 school districts within Franklin
Yeah.
are going to referendum in the fall.
Yeah,
Yeah.
So it's a thing where
it's a hot
you're
topic.
going to
Right.
get like that side eye of like,
Oh, yeah,
How
you'll get
much
that
you-
like, and how are we paying for this,
well,
right?
what,
Yeah.
like stop pussyfooting around,
Yeah.
like just tell me what you want,
Yeah.
sort of thing. Like I
So-
think that
That's a very good point.
It's a really good
because
point.
When you would mention anything about possible money in the sessions, did you see how all of a sudden people were like, whoop, nope, we don't want that. Mm-mm.
I mean-
like, forget it.
I mean-
Let's change topic.
Oak Creek Franklin's asking for $32 million for a pool. Franklin Public Schools is asking for $145 million. Whitnall is asking for $79.1 million. And that's just the schools. That's not, and there's the pie chart breakdown in City Hall of like, 40% of your
Yeah.
property taxes are school-based.
Yeah.
25% are municipal. Then you have MSD, you
There's the
have.
library asking for a survey.
Yeah.
You're
Right,
like,
right,
oh.
right. Yeah.
And-
And that's, I think that would make people like, I don't want to
Yeah.
know more about the library.
So there's a couple of ways that communities handle this. Some of it is handling it by having sort of a tongue-in-cheek or a cheeky response at the bottom, or an option in this saying, don't change a thing. Love it just the way it is. We could be transparent and say, I kind of changed the wording here. Libraries committed to maintaining current program services and collections as we seek to expand our reach. So we haven't said expand our budget. We haven't said expand our staff. We haven't said grow this, grow that. Now, someone might still look at this and be suspicious, right? I can see how that would happen. We could say something to the effect of, and I would caution against this, to say something to the effect of, we plan to work within our existing budget, because that's a hard promise to make. But we might be able to say, like, the library is not seeking a referendum on this topic. However, we want to know blank.
Is it better to like, in the opening of this, where, when you talk about background of, all right, this is where we were 5 years ago, this is where we are today, and this is where we're going.
Yeah.
Is it better to kind of put it saying, we're not looking for a financial commitment, but we're looking from the community to give direction on what the community wants to see
Yeah.
as, do you want more books?
Priorities.
And that could be part of the,
Dude,
yeah.
that's a perfect word right there.
Priorities.
Yeah.
Well, but the other question is, are you, and I don't know that you're willing to do this, but would you be willing to put a question, what service should we sunset? Because that would free up resources for something else.
Yeah. Now, we asked a version of that in the questions. Is there something the library provides that you don't find useful? I think
Not-
is how.
There was like nothing.
Yeah, that one was crickets.
Everybody was like,
Yeah.
no.
And it's a good question to ask. I mean, I don't think there's harm in asking that question of, because sometimes what happens is you'll find like oh yeah, nobody really uses the
Micro-
books on CD any longer, or something like that. That some people will start to pull up a couple of ideas of things that are older, or they say like, oh, we don't like this,
Right.
furniture in this area or whatever.
But then
Sometimes that will
somebody
come
will-
up, but
Somebody else would be like, but I use those all the time.
yeah, but some of that can also be borne out too in, kind of your usage data or.
We kind
Well,
of
but
know
that's where
that.
Yeah.
that's where it comes along. You brought up the concept of microfiche. Well, because it is really old technology, and you find a shrinking portion of your customer base using a particular service because that service has been enhanced or provided by somebody else at a reasonable cost or no cost or whatever it might be. And by sunsetting a program, that does free up resources for something else. And yes, somebody's going to say, I use that all the time, but you, from your own data, you know that that's a shrinking base.
Right, so we can go for data to look at that.
I don't really think we have anything
We tend to-
significant
Because I think librarians
Yeah.
tend to sunset things
on our own.
on our own. Like, oh yeah,
There's some
that's
things I'd like to
not-
sunset that people love.
So for you guys that deal with the most amount of people and the things in the library, what are are your things that you guys would like to ask? Is there anything missing from this list? What questions do you like the most? I mean, you guys deal with people asking and talking to you the most in the library, or is there something you want to know that's not in here?
No, I definitely like 5. I definitely like. No, not 5. Sorry. 4. Sorry, 4.
Okay.
Because I want to know how people vision themselves using the library in the near future.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because that will tell me a lot about what future trends.
Can we put, if we're looking for in the next,
Oh yeah, I'll
5
shore it up
years.
so that it's tighter. These are just big buckets
Right,
for right
okay.
now. Yeah, I hear you.
I
And I
just hope
don't
people
want to
will
lose
answer
the
that.
kernel of what we talked about, that the preamble to this is right in line with what you're saying.
Yes.
That this is to help us outline our strategic plan, the priorities for the next 5 years, not for any other hidden agenda other than understanding where this library is
I
going.
think that's
Yeah.
really necessary, especially
Yes.
because
Yeah.
everyone has been hammered with survey after
Yeah.
survey after survey, and then at the end of the day, it's like we're asking for
And now we need $35 million.
Right.
Yes.
I would
didn't
take
even
10,
think about that.
10,000.
That's a really good point.
10,000 would be nice. Maybe 20 or 30.
Yeah.
Because for a library, it's like.
Your
like
better
big.
way to ask that question is I'm asking for 5 cents more. 5 cents more per thousand on your tax bill.
Yeah.
It's an easier thing for somebody to say.
To visualize, it's like, 5 cents more
Yeah,
per
cool.
thousand. So I
That's-
pay, my house is worth 100,000. I'd just be paying $5.
Exactly.
Deal. That's a deal.
What about Carrie and Sarah?
I actually like question number 1. What do you value most about your library? Because we did that. I mean, if we did a strategic plan 5 years ago, I'd like to see if the priorities of our users has shifted too and what they value. So I think that would be useful information to have.
So
Yeah,
my
for sure.
follow-up question to that is, we want to keep that one tight. We want to give them choices.
Right.
Because otherwise people will say,
Yeah. No.
I love rando things.
I like the whole.
I like books.
Yeah, no, I like the ranking, like
Okay.
having a list and we'll rank in order, like.
What are some of the
What's-
things you'd want?
So yeah, that's the big question is what would be the
What are things that
boxes?
you guys really worked
Yeah.
on that you'd like to know if they have appreciated?
Hey, you're the one
She
who
wants
opened up the
children's
box here.
services.
Now you gotta
Yeah.
think about things.
Services, let's give more money to them.
Sorry, I bumped the cord.
I want library.
I want 10 cents per.
Well, I
It's
think
for
like,
the children.
right, I think some of our pillars that are in our previous strategic plan, we could go from there, like programming,
As a public, I don't know what you mean by programming.
How-
okay.
I don't.
think about it a lot.
When you say programming, I don't know what it is
Do
you're
you
talking
read our
about.
newsletter at all? I'm just curious. Do you read our, like, any of
Cursory.
them?
Yeah.
Like the newsletter in the library or the
So much
stuff from the
programming.
city?
And I'll speak up and say, when you say children's programming, I know what you mean, but I would write it in the way
Right,
that your
like-
community
like
would
events,
know. Right.
Events at the library.
So
or
story
like-
time.
Yes.
Right.
Stuff
But
like
like-
that.
That's meaningful
Yeah.
to me.
Okay,
Yes.
'Cause I
but so
think-
in our newsletter and in the city newsletter, it all says library programs. So programming is programs. So I'm pretty I mean, it,
But but then there's lists or information about that below that, and so it becomes obvious. But if you just have a sentence about library program and it doesn't have any other context, then
Oh.
it loses its meaning for me.
oh, okay.
And our goal with these surveys is to have this at about a 7th to 8th grade reading level. So despite how academic we've talked about
But I
this,
might be able to understand it.
we want this to be as accessible as possible language-wise. So yes, it may link out to something that is,
I'm not gonna take the time to link to every question.
oh, I hear you, but we
Oh,
want
yeah,
to also
yeah.
offer a couple of those opportunities. So
right.
like, the library website is here, or
Yeah.
the link to our previous strategic plan, just so that we do have context for people who might
I
not
get it.
have
I would
it.
probably link, like, if I really wanted to do a good job, like, I might
Yeah.
link on like something financial.
And
or-
I
or
want to
maybe
say,
the whole plan.
for time, I will give you a draft of this. I'm not making this and
Yeah.
sending this to the public. What I want to get at the heart of is these things that you want in this list before we end tonight
Yeah.
in about 10 minutes.
So what else?
I promise, I don't know what's happening, but I might just unplug it so
What
I
else
can
did
type.
we have in that strategic?
Well, programming,
Mine, you
outreach,
worked real hard on it.
collection development, or collection.
They won't know
Well,
what
it
collection
had-
Right, no,
development
I
is.
mean, but
Yeah.
I'm just
Yeah, you
saying
can't say
overall.
collections, 'cause you
Yeah, guys, I got you. You tell me the ideas. I will
Right.
make it into words your patrons will
Right, yeah.
understand. I
Okay.
promise you. I
I mean,
promise
we
you.
have those pillars that we all focus
You
on.
did, okay, yeah, you guys
So
did add
we
so
could
much
just-
in the collection, so the expansion of different types of
We've worked
collections.
hard in all of those areas.
yes.
So just seeing how the
They
patrons
noticed.
have noticed and what they're valuing based on like, those
Marketing the
pillars.
library.
Right.
Yeah, so the
Like
outreach,
that.
yeah, I would say that's 4 or 5 things, right?
Basically the facility.
And the
Yeah,
facility
facility.
itself,
Facility
because
is
we've
one.
done a
Really important.
decent amount of updates. I don't know if they'll realize
I don't know.
the paint and the things that have been, no?
The new
usually
vinyl, the
not.
vinyl chairs.
No, the only thing that they notice is when it's falling apart.
But then you get patrons who come in for the first time and think this is like
It's a
the
brand new-
beautiful,
Yep.
the most beautiful building
A
we've
lot
ever
of
seen for
people.
a
Fine, just
library.
don't go in the bathroom and
Yes.
look up.
But it's that
A lot
whole
of people
comparison
say that.
thing of
Right,
like, oh, look at this library versus.
The one I usually go to.
Yeah.
Right.
Or,
Mhm.
oh, I just moved up here from Raymond and it's oh, what's this? Or, you know,
Right.
like we
That's
say,
a
like,
good point.
That's
Somewhere
the
near
best.
here.
no one's
Yeah.
gonna say like, oh, this
Racine,
is,
I think.
this is so, you know, like, oh, that chair looks so rad. It's a,
You can't
it's
even
the
tell somebody
totality
peed
of
on
it
it
all, I think, is
yesterday.
more of a.
I mean, we do have tons of people who walk in and say, this is the most
That is so
beautiful
true.
library I've
I know.
ever seen.
Very true.
And we asked about the facility in the community conversations, and praise was very high for the building. People are proud of it. They think it looks great. They love your campus, we'll call it, with the green space around it, being close to the park, being close to City Hall. They feel like the library visually is being kept up very, very well. So I feel like that feedback was really strong.
Because they don't see the warts. I mean, you know,
Right.
those of us who work here, we
Yes.
see every single nick and.
Yeah, I mean, it's like living in your own home, right? You
Yeah.
look at all the ugly things in your house, and you're like, man, this ding
You
in
guys
the
have
wall.
talked about maintaining collections, but do you want to give people the option of which collections, or do you
No.
want to say?
I'm worried it would get
So
too.
much.
So
So many.
one of the
It's just too
things,
wordy.
one of the things I would caution against asking about collections of any kind in this is you have this information from your McFliss survey. You know that overwhelmingly 671 people who responded to the McFliss survey come to check out books, and they value that that the library has physical things for you to check out. There's almost no reason for you to ask that question unless you want to say, do you value books on CD? Do you value a specific segment of your collection? Because they will tell you that having the collection available is going to be their number 1, number 2, or number 3 thing. So if you leave, so this could be a funny question even, like, besides books, what do you value about your library? Because I think almost everyone in your community is going to expect this library to have books and things to check out.
I like that word.
I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
because actually it's not so much the books, it's the, well, I mean, except with the exception of the Wonder Books, but it's the other things, right, that we wanna, I mean, we know how many times they've been checked out, but I guess that we wanna know,
I like that question where we asked about barriers, because
Yeah, I
one
do
of-
like that
You know,
one.
one of the things that we had a number of people at one of the community conversations, there are a number of folks that they're over at the senior center all the time,
Mhm.
right? So it's like, okay, so that's kind of like a natural, where it's just like, okay, if somebody can't come to the library, how do we come to them? Wherever that is. And then I'm trying to understand, that's kind of the question mark, but where are there big enough buckets, like we're doing outreach to some of the senior living facilities, right? It's like, okay, you can't make it here, well, we'll bring stuff to you. What else can we do that's like that? Or do we expand the types of things that we do?
Can you read
for
that
folks?
question to us one more time?
Sure.
When you get there?
Yeah, let me type one more word.
Yeah, I don't know what happened to
Getting
the,
nervous about that blue screen of death there.
Blue
Yeah,
screen.
unplugged it, but before that.
CrowdStrike. Okay, let me see if I've got this back now. The hard part was I was typing and I have the teeniest little port here on my computer and okay.
There we go.
Ta-da!
Yeah.
All right. So,
There, you're on it right there. Nope.
oh, got it. Okay.
Are there any barriers?
So I've added a few things here as we were talking. So cannot physically access facility, cannot physically access materials, library location is not convenient, service is not offered in my language.
So that's one that I would want to, that I think we worry about, right?
like,
However, I will say that during some of the sensory story times, I've tried to like chat with some of the moms a little bit more, and I don't want to get too far into this because we're limited on time. But one of the moms said her 2 primary languages in her household were, which this is interesting, Arabic and Spanish. And English is not really spoken inside their household, it's just spoken in public and at school. So I asked her a few things about the physical library and what she thought about the books that we have, the signage we have, just kind of in general, all different things. I told her what we were doing and why I was asking these odd questions. And she thought that a lot of it, none of it was a problem. That they felt like what we have is what they expect. Which I guess we don't want to just be there.
Right.
We want to be above the
Right.
bar.
That's what I was.
But yeah, and she felt that, yeah, it would be nice if we offered some kind of programs that maybe people could practice, like as their newer speakers, that they would be able to be comfortable with. But that wasn't something that she had even really thought of, before I had said anything.
Yeah.
But she also felt that our communication, like where to find information, all that stuff. I mean, she was here for a program, so obviously, like, she finds out where to get that stuff. But she thought that everything, we were doing a great job and stuff. So she had no issues with it.
I wonder, could you maybe flip that question and instead of it being what are the barriers, could you say what could the library do to reduce barriers to service? And maybe have it be like, instead of services not offered in these languages, say the library offers services in more languages.
I think we could flip it from a negative to a positive. I think the challenge in that question then is
What are you asking?
the library couldn't possibly
No,
live up to all of them.
Yeah.
So it might set the bar a little too high, but I'm also sort of I skew cynical. So that might just be my take on it, but we could probably reframe it on the flip side. So take it from negative to positive. I think we might have, this one might also benefit from a little more exposition.
Is one of the things that you want to put up there cultural centers? You know, like where you have a Spanish center, you have an Arabic center, or you might have a, we are a country of melting pot, and we seem to be having more and more immigrants from all over the world here. Does the library offer anything for those other populations?
If we were to take one of these things out, can I make a suggestion? If you're trying to shorten it, hours inconvenient, we just changed our hours.
Yeah, we did a really big.
Yeah, I'm not married to any of these on here. You
Yeah.
tell me what's most relevant for you to
So
know.
that's just one that
Yeah.
we could eliminate to make it a little bit shorter.
Sure.
Unless people say, you're only open until 8, we want you to be open till 9.
Well,
Yeah,
by
but we're
all
not gonna
means.
change them again.
No,
But they
So-
can write that in then next to others.
they could,
Yeah,
they could do
you would
it.
have
Yeah.
the opportunity to say, you know, we want
Cause I think when we
8-day a
add
week service.
too
I mean, they
many
could write
things,
anything in the other category.
How dare
they're
you
gonna
be
get
closed
lost.
on Frog's Day.
When we're talking about not enough space, what in particular are we saying?
It's just something I wrote in. It doesn't have to stay. So we could say not enough meeting space. We could
space.
say
Yeah. Is that 'cause
you
not
said
enough, not enough seats, not enough.
The children's area is too crowded. It's not ADA accessible.
Yeah, I think by leaving it, not enough space, that kind of lets them go either way.
Hard part is we won't
we
know
don't want them
specifically
to
what
go
they
Yeah.
would be
Yeah.
referring
So then
to.
I would almost
We would
put,
need something more specific.
then I would almost, can you put not enough space in the children's area or meeting room? I mean, because both of those have been brought up.
Which would you want?
Study
Which
room.
would you want to, and could you address if it's
Meeting
a
rooms
problem?
probably. Because children's area, we already have that in the plan, right?
Yeah, down the road.
I mean, it still is down the road, but that's in the next 5 years that you were rearranging stuff, at least. So that's, we're already addressing it.
And going along that language flip, we would say this like, you know, what would create fewer barriers for you to be at the library? More meeting space,
Right.
more whatever. So we can flip that language to be positive. Bigger, better coffee shop, more baristas.
The farmer's market.
Oh my gosh, people want a farmer's market so bad.
bad.
So bad.
Why,
I
still
do
don't
too.
understand why we can't. get
I don't
one.
understand why we can't.
And food
be-
trucks.
Why
No,
can't we get
Sundays.
one?
What is it?
So much work.
Maybe
Sunday
we can just have a coffee
afternoon.
truck.
What if there's a coffee farmer and then
Yes!
then we've got it all. Okay, these are really good concrete ideas. I think we're on to a
And do
really
we
good
have like
draft
the
of
right
this.
amount almost of questions?
So
now?
I think we're darn close. So we've got 1, 2, 4, 5, and then I think we're getting at maybe our 5th question is something about
Something,
this, something about the finances.
Okay, so then that's good.
What would you do with the finance information when you get
Move
it?
this along.
I know. So I think you have the opportunity here
I
to
think-
poll your community about how they want to learn about how the money works.
I think it's an educational piece for them. It's not really for us, is essentially what this is, right?
And you may have in the drop down options, one of the answers could be, I literally don't care about this. Because you may find that your community says they care about it and they maybe do or don't. And that might be important for you to know. Because then you could do that more as an internal function with your board, with your municipality, and not worry so much about communicating to your community.
I
No,
kind
but
of,
I'm thinking that we also have an opportunity, that this is like advocacy
yeah,
for the library. So
Yeah.
the larger army of individuals that we can create that are informed about the things that are, you want more? We'll go for more, but you've got to give us a reason to say, we just did a survey. All these people say, you need to fund the library.
exactly.
You
It's
know,
it's an
and so it needs to be
education
a priority.
for,
Now, granted, we're kind of in a good place in that we have since I've been on the library board, we're in a lot better position in just the relationship that we have with those folks that handle the dollars. And so, you know, it's always the sell message, right? You know, and you have to have the numbers behind it where people will go, okay, I guess we're doing this because we don't want to have you know, people in an uproar because we're not supporting the thing that they really care about a lot in the city.
Yeah. And from my perspective, coming up to like that 30,000 foot view, I really think there is a finance related strategy. You know, if we talk about this, whether it's pillars or goal areas, that whether or not your allocation ever changes, you may be able to influence that one way or the other, but whether or not that changes, I think there are some really strong goals emerging about how do we understand this as to where we fit in with the city's priorities, how do we understand this as a return on investment, and how do we appropriately communicate that to the stakeholders, whether that's our board, our community members, our electeds. I think that's a really strong emerging goal from what we've heard from everybody from this committee and from your community members. And then underneath that, there can be lots of actions that you take. This survey might just be the introductory question about what your community wants to know about that.
Right, and then adding in the foundation there is also letting people know that we have a foundation.
Yeah.
So
We
and
don't
then,
have a friends group though.
Yeah, it's not friends. It's just foundation.
Yeah, and that's fine. These are all
But
just sort
you
of
know
placeholders.
what might be
for now.
interesting is, I have had comments through the last few years that people think we should have a friends group.
Yeah. So maybe this is sort of the key here. If we keep a question around the foundation, is this idea of, you know, time, talent, and treasure. Some people have money to donate, and some people have their talents or their time. And so within these drop-down items, I could create some categories around you can give this way, you can give this way, and help people. Again, this is probably best as maybe a check all that apply type of question, so that because people might we don't ever want to discourage anyone from donating money, but they may think of other ways that they could contribute. So maybe a check all that apply would help you see which things appeal to your community and which don't, and then again create some strategies around that within that probably overarching goal of finances.
So are we to the point that you think you can get like a very rough draft?
Absolutely, yeah.
Perfect.
We should be able to have that pretty soon based on this conversation. I also think the really good thing here is that you're asking deeper questions than what we did at the community conversation. So this too, in communities that I work with, sometimes we do the survey and then the survey informs the conversations. Sometimes we do the conversations that then inform the survey. And I think this is going to be a strong questions for your community. So your goal is to have quality responses. Your goal is not necessarily to have a scientifically, statistically significant survey here, because you're really having people have to give some thoughtful answers to these harder questions.
We probably just won't have as many, but we don't need the number in responses.
Yeah,
And I'll go back, you have
Quality in
over
responses.
600 responses that tell you a lot of things from that
Right.
McFliss survey that just happened within the last year.
Is
So,
this group getting together again, and if so, when are we doing that?
we would still be on our same cadence as far
It'll
as
be after the survey though.
Yeah.
Is deployed.
Theoretically.
So when we have the survey ready, distribute among the strategic planning committee first before it goes.
So what I typically do is I draft it, or sometimes the library director drafts it, because some library directors are real type A and they like to do it themselves. But whether I draft it or not, we distribute and we test it amongst ourselves, because sometimes we'll see that the wording doesn't, when we see it in real life, the wording doesn't sound like the way we wanted it. I always want to make sure that we do a test version of the survey so that we can see how the results populate, because sometimes they don't populate the way that we want them to. So that's that first glance. Then when we agree that it's ready, after testing it, then it can launch. I don't recommend keeping a survey out more than 4 weeks, because unless you're constantly promoting it, you're going to get a spike every time you promote it, and then it's going to dip down and then spike and then dip down. So 3 to 4 weeks is really what I recommend. And we can also gauge that on the responses. If we get 200, 300 responses within that first week, you all might go like, okay, cool, we got what we need. And that's fine too. Very rarely do surveys like this. They are very rarely statistically significant. And that just speaks to the fact that you have a set number of library users. So if we estimate that, Jennifer, as like our 13,000 card holders, I think we would need more than 10% of that to be statistically significant.
We had over 1,000 with the
Yeah,
last survey.
and you might, but I just want to caution you, like, this is not, we're not publishing this in a journal. This is just for our internal purposes. So I think if we're getting to that 200, 300 range, we might say, like, thank you so much, everyone. Ta-da, the survey's closed. If we don't feel like the results are coming in the way we want, we might have to do some additional effort to promote it. Given the engagement of your community and the ways that you'll be promoting it, I don't think that's going to be a problem for you.
When do you think it will be ready to go out to people?
I can probably have the draft to everybody before the end of this week. So, I mean, I don't think it will be
Because summer programming is ending like next week,
I
and then
know.
we're going to be in a
Yeah.
little lull.
It would be so, I know that's really tight, but it would be so awesome to launch it right before summer reading program was done.
Yeah.
Because that's.
And at the
when-
Milkman
Yeah.
game. it
And
would
at the
be cool.
Milkman,
Yeah.
I mean,
Okay.
So
I mean, this
it
can
just
be
on
this can be
national
this can be a top priority.
Like,
There's
can
no
we-
hurdle to that.
Can we like approve it through email? Like you guys get the draft done, kind of go over.
That's
it, and
almost
then-
always how this happens
Okay,
in the groups that I work
yeah.
with, whether
Okay.
I'm working with a board directly or a community group like this. We typically don't meet again to look
Okay.
at the survey because it is electronic in nature. So
Anyhow,
it's just a
yeah.
matter of all of us taking a
Test.
look at it, testing it,
Okay.
and kind of giving it that endorsement.
Okay.
so would our next meeting be August 27th, the last Tuesday in?
Yeah, because if we could launch it before summer reading program and the Milkman game, that would.
And
give
National
us
Night
some-
Out,
And
Carrie,
yeah, that would.
Yeah.
And the other benefit is even if we don't close the survey, we would still be looking at a good amount of responses at that point, even if it's not over and done with.
Yeah, but we would just give it to a lot more people.
Yes, yes.
All right, I'm gonna put the 27th at 5 o'clock or 5:30.
Can you do 5 o'clock? I mean, I know today.
I know
Carrie-
I'm in a tough spot because my volleyball coaching has kicked in.
Ah.
So let me just look at that date, and it just might be a matter of it might have to be just either a titch later in the evening. Let's see. Oh, the 27th is not going to work for me. I have a match that night, so I have to coach my team.
Okay. The 26th is the library board meeting, so that won't work.
Yeah, but the 28th, that Wednesday, would work for me. And if we do 5:30, 5:30 can work for me
On that Wednesday.
on that Wednesday. Yeah, 5 just might be tough for me.
Anybody have any issues with the 28th at
I
5:30?
can't do
On
the
that day.
28th. I could do the 29th, but not the 28th.
What's the 29th like for everybody?
I have to host a fundraiser that night, so
Okay.
I cannot.
Okay.
Do it on the 28th.
Okay.
At 5:30, right?
Yeah. Okay. And I will get the survey in motion as soon as possible so that we can all get eyeballs on it. But we've got a pretty good draft here, so it's just a matter of populating that information and then you all reading it to make sure the language sounds good.
Awesome.
I'll probably ask you to maybe for what links, but you can, I'll let you decide what you think is best for those link outs, and I'll just kind of note it as like possibly insert link here, that sort of thing.
And you guys will be able to put it into the survey stuff. You know how to do that enough? Or do you need help putting it into any of the survey forms?
Like the Google form?
Yeah.
No, I think
Yeah.
we're pretty.
Yeah.
You guys are.
Yeah, I think it might just be that we may want to just discuss what the paper version would look like.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly, yeah.
which is fine. I don't think we're asking anything too difficult that couldn't translate, because we are using kind of ranked choice and a lot of check boxes, so I don't think that'll be too difficult either. Okay, great. Thank you so much. This is really, really, really helpful feedback. I felt like after the community conversations, I was like, I don't know what we're going to ask the community, but this has really helped crystallize it, so I appreciate that.
We got a room full of good talkers.
Yeah. Well, and you all are asking really good questions, so that makes a huge difference in how you represent your community.
Okay, it's 7:11, so we'll adjourn. Have a good evening.